Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our A-Push review series, period 5 episode. Thank you so much for listening today. Really appreciate it. Let's get right into it with some things to know, 5 things to know, in fact, about period 5. Number 1 is that Americans enthusiastically supported Western expansion in hopes of finding new economic opportunities. The philosophy of manifest destiny emerged as motivation really for westward migration. America's expansionist philosophy extended into its foreign policy as well, as evidenced by the conflict over the Oregon Territory with Britain and involvement in the Mexican-American War. So pretty much the big thing about manifest destiny that you really need to know is manifest destiny is, to sum it up in one simple sentence, the belief that Americans had the God-given right to establish their country from sea to shining sea, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and it was something that they must, by the Lord, do. Like something that just must happen, no matter what. And that's a belief that many Americans held. So, yeah. Number 2 is the Compromise of 1850, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and the Dred Scott decision were all important attempts made by national leaders in the courts to resolve issues surrounding slavery. Debate about slavery, as well as economic, political, and cultural differences, led to a widening gap between the North and the South. Despite various efforts at compromise, the South, which is 11 states in all, seceded from the United States Union, beginning the Civil War and forming the Confederate States of America. Due to the superior military strategy, much more resources, and a much larger population, as well as stronger infrastructure, the Union defeated the Confederacy. During the war, President Lincoln declared an end to slavery with the Emancipation Proclamation, and after war worked to rebuild the country. After his assassination, many questions remain, however, about the role of the federal government and citizens' rights, including women, African Americans, and other minorities. After the Civil War, the 13th Amendment officially ended slavery, and the 14th and 15th Amendments further expanded the rights of African Americans. Despite these efforts, African Americans faced great hardship getting equal rights in employment, especially where most of them were located in the South. So, yeah. Let's start with talking about the impacts of manifest destiny. It was coined by the journalist John O'Sullivan back in 1845 and described the belief, again, that it was God's will for the United States to expand westward to the Pacific Ocean. And if something is God's will, that really kind of means it's got to happen. It also describes a more general expansionism policy, such as the dispute over the Oregon Territory, that the Polk campaign on the U.S. expansion into the Southwest following the Mexican-American War. Pretty much the general idea that everything, no matter, come hell or high water, America must be from sea to shining sea. And pretty much north-south, it should expand pretty far as well. So, leading to, obviously, the territory that we had today. Throughout the 1840s, a flood of settlers began traversing the dangerous Oregon Trail. Families traveled with up to 6 months in caravans, covering only about 15 miles per day with good weather, so it took a long time. While living on the trail, some women began to run prayer meetings in schools to maintain some vestiges of home. Women also began to take on new roles outside of homemaking and childcare, such as repairing wagon wheels and tending the livestock. During this time, the president was Martin Van Buren. His presidency was marred by an economic depression resulting from the policies of his predecessor, Andrew Jackson. The Panic of 1837 dogged his administration, and Van Buren became the first president to be born a U.S. citizen, the only president to speak English as a second language. Dutch was his primary language spoken in his childhood home. The Panic of 1837 was a financial crisis that lasted from 1837 until the mid-1840s, caused in part by Andrew Jackson killing the Bank of the United States and issuing the Specie Circular, which we talked about in the last episode, I remember, which causing the value of paper money to go down severely. The Whig Party was born out of opposition to Jacksonian Democrats, and the Whigs favored economic nationalism, strong central government, and rechartering the national bank. They believed the protectionist measures such as tariffs were necessary to support American industrialization. They also promoted Henry Clay's American System, which was an infrastructure project. The party collapsed, though, over the question of slavery's expansion into those newly acquired territories that were acquired during Manifest Destiny. William Henry Harrison was our 9th president. He was a hero of the War of 1812 during the Battle of Tippecanoe. The memorable slogan, the Tippecanoe and Tyler II he easily defeated Martin Van Buren in 1840. However, he gave his inaugural address on a cold and rainy day and neglected to wear a warm coat, so he died of pneumonia. John Tyler was the 10th president, 1841-1845. You don't need to know that, though. He was a Virginian Whig, and he was the first vice president to ascend to the presidency upon the death of the incumbent. Daniel Webster was a key U.S. senator from Massachusetts. He was a Whig politician and member of the Great Triumvirate. During the debate over the tariff of 1816, he complained that New England had not developed enough to withstand interruptions in its ability to trade freely with Britain, and opposing the nullification, if you remember, from the past episodes we have done. James Polk was our 11th president, an heir of sorts to Andrew Jackson. He advocated for Manifest Destiny. His campaign slogan was 54, 40, or fight. Yet, while the slogan advocated a hardline position on the disputed Oregon Territory, he reached instead a diplomatic agreement with Britain. So 54, 40, or fight was the pretty much idea that it was in reference to the longitude-latitude coordinates that were on the Oregon Territory, and if they didn't give those up, and the United States was not, the United States territory was not at 54-40, they would fight Great Britain. The Mexican-American War was a conflict between the United States and Mexico, not Britain. It took place from April 1846 to February 1848, following the 1845 American annexation of Texas, which Mexico considered a wayward province whose independence was a legal fiction created under duress. So they kind of fought over Texas, and then when they won, America beat Mexico, who was much less strong than America was at the time, government-wise. They were like, hey, why don't we take like New Mexico and Arizona as well? We can do that. That's cool. So, yeah, that's what they decided to do. Sam Houston was the president of Texas. He advocated annexation by the United States. Later, though, he became the Texas governor. He resisted efforts at secession to join the Confederacy and was removed from office. So the Alamo was a big site, the site of a famous battle in San Antonio, Texas. A small force of Texans found themselves under siege from February 23rd to March 6th in the year 1836. Mexican forces led by Santa Anna eventually took the Alamo, killing all the defenders in the process. However, news of the resistance inspired other Texans to rebel, especially thanks to an open letter to the people of Texas and all Americans in the world by the Alamo's commander named William B. Travis. So the Republic of Texas was a republic very short-lived. It was declared in 1836 until the United States decided to annex them. So pretty much the way the Mexican-American War played out was when John Slidell, not Seidel, a special envoy sent by President James K. Polk to inform the Mexican government of the U.S. desires to draw the Texas border at the Rio Grande rather than the farther south Nueces River. They pretty much tried to purchase California, and in anticipation of Mexican resistance to Slidell's proposal, Polk amassed the U.S. Army ready to fight their case and make sure that they were going to be able to get Texas. Zachary Taylor was the 12th president. He died of a stomach ailment. Taylor was a Mexican-American war general. The Whigs nominated him in the 1848 election. He was a slave owner, but he did not advocate the expansion of slavery, believing the practice was not economically viable in the West, which is, again, the most strong objection you can possibly have to slavery there, right? So, Taylor was the 12th president. Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president, served from 1861 to his assassination on April 15th, 1865. He was a former Whig who opposed the Mexican-American War. He joined the newly formed Republican Party. His 1860 election triggered the secession of several states because they had just had it with people telling them, hey, maybe we shouldn't do slavery anymore. Maybe that's not a good thing. So yeah, that's what pretty much started the Civil War. But we'll get to that in a minute. First, we got to talk about this Wilmot Proviso. Following the Mexican-American War, Representative David Wilmot proposed that slavery would be forbidden in any new lands acquired by the war with Mexico. The final bill passed the House but failed in the Senate. The bill, which was the Wilmot Proviso, signaled the start of an even deeper crisis that would pit the North against the South over issues of slavery expansion, states' rights, and government representation. This developing at the time was the Bear Flag Republic. We don't really need to know about that. But we should talk about the Treaty of the Guadalupe Hidalgo, signed in 1848. It ended the Mexican-American War. The treaty granted California and most of the Southwest, including current-day New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Nevada, to the United States. The U.S. government agreed to pay war reparations in the sum of $15 million to the Mexican government. Despite continued bitter debate over the expansion of slavery, the treaty was ratified. So, yeah, $15 million paid there to the Mexican government, which is a pretty big concession there from the United States. And the Gadsden Purchase was something that arose from that. It was part of the 1853 treaty in the U.S. and Mexico. This kind of falls under the category of slavery and conflicts between the North and South getting a little bit more contentious. So in exchange for $10 million, the U.S. purchased a chunk of modern-day Arizona and a small portion of southwest Mexico. This was the last notable expansion of the continental U.S., so not Alaska or Hawaii. This is the last time we've ever expanded territory. And this was going to be slave-free. So this was modern-day Arizona and a small portion of southwest New Mexico that was purchased. So what are abolitionists? Abolitionists are advocates for ending slavery. Aside from the influence of Enlightenment ideas about freedom, many abolitionists believe that slavery was sinful and therefore must be eliminated, more in a Christian context. As Charles Sumner said in 1860, God set an everlasting difference between a man and a chattel, giving to man dominion over fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. That fight we hold by his donation, but man over man he made not Lord, such title to himself reserving, human left from human free. So pretty much what that means is all men should be free. If you're of a mankind, you are equal. George Fitzhugh was a notable pro-slavery intellectual, and what was interesting is he was kind of the beginning of the Southern propaganda machine that really began to spin up in resistance to calls to abolish slavery. His sociology books detailed the allegedly happy lives of Southern slaves who were clothed, fed, and held by these very nice slave owners. Fitzhugh argued that in his book, Cannibals All, that African-American slaves were much better off than the northern wage slave, who was not provided with basic living needs for him and his family. Fitzhugh also argued that slavery itself could be easily applicable to whites. I wonder why that never happened, because pretty much everything he was writing was complete BS. The Free Soil Party was inspired by the Wilmot Proviso, where anti-slavery advocates from, not abolitionists, but anti-slavery advocates who pretty much didn't like slavery for more selfish economical reasons. They founded the Free Soil Party to oppose the expansion of slavery in the Western Territory. Martin Van Buren ran for president as a Free Soil candidate in 1848, but the Free Soil Party's membership was later absorbed in the new Republican Party. So at this time, also, the gold rush was happening. We got to talk about that. It took place in California, obviously, which took between the years 1848 and 1855. Roughly, the population of California ballooned as prospectors flocked to the state to seek a fortune mining gold. Over 100,000 American Indians died as settlers and prospectors violently displaced them. And the nickname of these people were the 49ers. Sound familiar? It's a football team today. San Francisco 49ers, a nickname for the influx of immigrants to California in 1849 seeking riches for the gold rush. A big influx of Chinese immigrants came at this time. Henry Clay was a statesman and orator for Kentucky, the great compromiser. He was known that for brokering multiple deals over nullification and slavery. He was also a proponent of infrastructure development that he called the American system. Clay notably ran for president on several occasions, but never won, unfortunately. He was a big part of the Compromise of 1850, a package of several bills that alleviated some of the tension between the North and South, delaying the Civil War for another decade. Orchestrated by Henry Clay, its key points were California was admitted as a free state, it created the New Mexico and Utah territories, and popular sovereignty would determine a slavery status in them. So pretty much the people who lived in that state, could vote, these newly found states could vote to decide